Welcome back to MVM. Today I am here with Shaolia Warring States, which is on Kickstarter right now from Bad Comet. Shaolia is a kind of fantasy game rooted in mythology where you play as leaders of warring states battling for control of this continent. And this is a head-to-head game that is played either 1v1 or in teams 2v2. So you're going to experience the game in one of those two ways with the goal of just defeating your opponent. Now you can defeat your opponent in two different ways, either by dealing enough damage to their palace to destroy it, or by gaining 18 culture on your culture track and winning the game that way. So as you watch this video, just keep in mind that those are your two goals. Now you're gonna see the game set up here before me, and you're gonna have a variety of different components. For one, you're going to have this game mat that is divided into 8 different sections. It also has a palace on it as well, and 2 areas that start off the game locked. This is your tableau where you're going to be able to place your buildings as you play the game. That's the core idea of the game, is you're placing these buildings and then rolling dice to trigger these buildings' abilities. So there is a little bit of dice placement mixed in here with this tableau building experience. In addition, you're going to set up a market and you're going to place out all of these different types of resources. Now you're going to see gold coins, you're going to see hearts that for damage, minerals, which is another resource in the game. You're going to see officers, which you can use to mitigate your dice, and a variety of other components that I'll talk about during the game. Now, setup to this game is completely variable. There are several different scenarios you can play through, a few 1v1 scenarios and some 2v2 scenarios. If you look in the rulebook, you're actually going to see just like full art, a description of what the scenario is like, and then complete setup rules listed as well in that rulebook. Some of these scenarios are going to have you play as characters, and there's a deck of character cards that can be dealt out. And the number of these characters that you get to control, again, is based on the scenario. So this game is very modular. There are a ton of buildings that I'm not using in this version of the game because they're saved for different variable setups. So once you've got everything set up, and again, I have a game already in progress here, and you'll notice the setup already. Keep in mind, this is a Kickstarter prototype, so these are not necessarily final components, but this game does look pretty close to being done here. You're going to set your culture marker on 0, and you start with no damage to your palace. Normally, you'd start off with an empty board here, but I do want to kind of talk about how the game is played. So you're going to take a few steps on your turn, starting with the first player or whoever has the flag miniature. So in this instance, I would start the game. And depending on the game mode, you're going to start with a certain amount of gold. In a lot of cases, that could be 5 gold. It could be a differing amount. So you're going to have some gold available that you're going to be able to spend on your turn. You're going to enter to the buy phase where you can buy buildings. Now you're going to see a deck of level 1 building cards here. And these level 1 building cards can be purchased for a gold, and you're going to be able to take one. And these buildings all have the same basic features: a type, a name, a cost, a health value, because you can actually destroy your opponent's buildings, and a die symbol at the bottom, or a passive ability symbol at the bottom that's going to tell you what happens either when the building is triggered, or in the case of a passive ability, it just kind of happens every time it would be triggered. In addition, next to the level 1 row, you're going to see this row of level 2 cards. These level 2 cards cannot be purchased with gold. You have to save up some level 1 cards and discard 3 in order to take one of those level 2 cards. Now every time you take a card, for example, I pay a gold, I take a card, it is not instantly built. It actually sits out in front of me. So players are going to be able to look at each other's buildings and see what they have available to build at all times. In addition, you're going to be able to buy some of these tokens up here, including officers. These little officer miniatures are going to be gathered in front of you, and they're going to help you mitigate your dice rolling. When it comes time to roll the die, you're going to be able to trade them in. In addition, you can actually buy even more dice. Everyone starts with 3, but you're going to be able to add a potential 4th die to that you're going to be able to roll on your turn. So I'm going to take my buying phase actions. I can buy the buildings, the dice, the officers, and then it's going to go to my opponent, and they're going to do the same thing. Then it comes back to me to then build. I get to look at all the buildings I have purchased in past rounds or even this most recent round, and I'm going to be able to build it by paying the cost printed there. This is just 1 gold. When you build something, it just comes out into your tableau in front of you. Some of the level 2 buildings actually have requirements. You're going to see it requires you to have a different other building in your tableau before you can even place this building down. Like I said, there are just a variety of different buildings. Some of them are going to produce gold for you. Some are going to produce minerals. Some are going to attack to do damage. Some are going to have passive abilities. Some are going to be defensive buildings that have to be built in your front row. And as you build your tableau, you're going to notice it starts to get filled. You'll probably have to pay the 3 gold to unlock these locked tiles sometime during the game. Once you've placed the building, it's there. You cannot move it. However, you can demolish a building at any time by just removing it from the game. Maybe it is not working for you anymore. Maybe you've gotten an upgraded, better version and you want to clear up that space for something else. You can do that, but you cannot bring it back later and move it around on the board. So once I've done all my building, then my opponent gets their turn to build as well. Once you're done building, you're going to have a new tableau in front of you, several different buildings here with several different abilities, and those abilities are going to be triggered by rolling the dice in the action phase. You'll take your 3 dice, or 4 if you purchased an extra die earlier, and roll them. And you're going to notice the pip values are going to correspond to the symbols printed on these cards. Some of these abilities, like the 3 starting abilities that are linked to your palace, will say any, which means they can use any die. So you're going to be able to place these dice out on your cards and trigger the abilities of these buildings. Again, you can use these officers to change the value of that die so they can spin up or down to fit what you need when you're placing them. Because as you place the dice, you want to keep in mind on what abilities you're getting. Some of these are going to produce resources, like I said, or deal damage. And dealing damage is one of the key ways to win, but also so is gaining culture. So you kind of have to decide if you're going to focus on one or the other, or try to kind of balance both of those. But you're always going to need gold and minerals in order to play the game. In addition, some of these buildings will let you trade with the market. And you're going to see the market here. And as you can tell, there are 4 printed market stalls and then 4 that are variable. These variable market stalls are going to change based on the scenario you're playing. So during that setup phase, it's going to tell you which of these to use. Now, depending on which market building you have, you're going to be able to make a few different trades. Some are going to give you trades at a bonus when you're buying or selling. It just depends on the card you're using to make that trade. And again, you only get to trade with the market when you place the die on there to activate that building, because that is the next phase of the game. After you've rolled out your dice, you're going to activate each of those buildings. Each building can only be activated once. Some of these buildings, especially some of the higher level 2 buildings, will have optional slots. You cannot ever trigger both of those slots. And some, like this here, requires 2 different dice, for example, a 5 and a 6, to deal 5 damage to your opponent. And when damage is dealt, you can spread it out. You can deal it to buildings to destroy those buildings, or you can deal it to the palace directly. When a building is destroyed, it is simply removed from the game and you lose that building. You have the option to build defensive structures. As long as those defensive structures sit in your front row, they have to be attacked first. They kind of soak all the damage in until they're destroyed. So it's good to have those to protect some of your other buildings. If your palace ever has 12 damage on it, you lose and your opponent wins the game. In addition to producing resources, you're going to see all these different tokens that can happen during this activation phase. You're going to see health tokens here that will increase the maximum health of one of your buildings. You're going to have combat tokens, which a combat token can be turned in to give you 1 additional attack when you deal damage. And you're going to see lock tokens. Lock tokens are placed on buildings and they stop you from being able to use any of the actions on that tile. Now you can pay 3 gold during the building phase to take that off, but it is kind of a hassle to have that happen. And these are all going to be gathered by certain buildings as well. So you really want to kind of build an engine among your tableau to feed into this, either that culture victory or that combat victory, depending on which way you want to go. At the end of the round, you're going to take the flag, you're going to pass it over to the other player. You're going to refill any cards that were missing from the row, and then you're going to continue on with the same phases, but this time your opponent is going to take the action of each phase first. You're going to buy your cards and dice and officers. You're going to then move on to the building phase, the dice rolling phase, etc. And the game continues in this fashion, going back and forth from player to player until one of you has defeated the other in either of the 2 ways. And like I said earlier, the game is modular and there are a ton of different campaigns. There are several included in the main book. There's always the possibility that new in-game triggers will be introduced, new victory conditions, loss conditions, and things like that. So pay attention to the Kickstarter page because they're probably going to have more of these than what I have here in just my prototype rulebook. So That is Shaolia, Warring States. It is on Kickstarter right now. You can take a look to their Kickstarter page, which is in the link below. So go check that out and come back here and let me know what you think of it. And thank you for liking, subscribing, follow us, and watching everything we do. And I will see you next time.